Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this awesome session with a special guest, Jeff Shaskin, who is managing director at Genesis Group. And Jeff, maybe you can kind of jump in here and give us a little more details about the Genesis Group in a second. But today we're going to be diving into how to advance your product marketing career using soft skills. And Jeff, you wrote an article for our product marketing digest on Substack, and I know it was a big hit. A lot of folks really enjoyed it. And soft skills is just certainly something that a lot of folks just, and again, we'll dive into it. I just think that is undervalued and underappreciated. And so we're really excited about that. I would argue that soft skills are certainly, in my career as a salesperson, I've always believed them to be something that we're critical, right? Not just internally, and I know you're going to dive into some of those things here, but also externally, being able to understand how to connect with humans, your buyers, right? And when you're working deals and things like that. But real quick, Justin, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And Jeff, thanks so much for being on here and being such a great friend of Asset Mule. I guess as George mentioned, managing director at Genesis Group. Maybe you can give us a quick intro quickly on who you are and what you do, and then we can dive into the soft skills here.
My pleasure. So thank you, Justin, and thank you, George. This is an honor and a privilege to be here. So the Genesis Group is an organization which really is supposed to help companies grow. I created the Genesis Group way back in the early 2000s when companies really needed their help, as much help as they can get. They were, kind of starting out. They didn't know where to go, and they couldn't afford to hire like a Bain or a McKinsey or a BCG to really help them move. And so I actually created this organization to really provide what I learned to be best practices as a product marketer, as well as a go-to-market expert, to help these companies get to where they are today.
Awesome. And I know you have such a wealth of experience in product marketing, in go-to-market. And one of the things that you've been talking about for years that, again, I've mentioned this a couple of times on LinkedIn, that I think is underappreciated, isn't talked about as much when it comes to product marketing and a lot of other professions too, but specifically product marketing, is soft skills. You wrote a post as George mentioned on a Substack, and you talked about three key skills, soft skills that product marketers need. One is the ability to embrace high profile, visible projects. Another is the ability to master adaptive learning and advanced technologies. And the third is to align with actually some non-traditional stakeholders within the organization. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about each one of those, and then we can start to unpack some of them here.
Yeah, definitely. So these are what I call more kind of advanced beginner intermediate skills, to be honest. The way I see it here is that I think that there is a wealth of great information across the board right now. You can learn messaging from folks like Emma. You can learn positioning from folks like April. You can learn how to make a great sales tool from Justin and George right here. I think that they're great. My little piece of the pie here is I'm just trying to share what I call the unsung heroes of what makes a product marketer successful. And so, let's kind of start from the top here. So with respect to embracing high visibility projects, one thing that's important to realize is that in order to stay employed at the grand scheme of things, you need to find the projects that make you the most visible and the most valuable. And one thing I learned in my career early on was that if you work on really small wins, that's great, but it really doesn't really move the needle. And when you're in a company where everyone is moving up hard and fast, you really have to make sure that you kind of follow their cadence. And that's a really great way to do it. So if you can join these projects, even in a very small capacity, it just gives you the visibility you need to start your stuff out.
Awesome. Well, I have a quick question on that particular one, because that one really resonated with me. And I've heard people kind of share both sides of the coin. In one way, some people are like, look for the quick wins, right? In other ways, like yourself, people lean more into the high visibility projects. I understand sort of the quick wins angle, but I kind of tend to agree with you on, really, if you want to take that leap and be seen as a strategic partner of the business, you really need to align yourself with these high visibility projects. Do you have any recommendations on let's say I'm a product marketer, I just joined an organization, I'm trying to take that big step, right, and really establishing myself within the organization. How do I go about finding out what these high visibility, high impact projects are, and sort of position myself to be the go-to source for the go-to-market around it?
So that's a great question. So my way of doing that is very simple. I really love to talk. I'm an extrovert by trade, so I like to actually talk to people. It's very easy. A lot of product marketers are very cerebral, very introverted, and they really are very unassuming. The way that you really survive as a product marketer is that you have that visibility with the people that matter. And those are the folks like the VP of sales, which they always talk about, the VP of product, which is kind of a basic because everyone kind of talks about that. But the other people that's equally important, if not more so in some cases, are the customer success people, the people who actually take it and run with it, because they're the ones who actually make sure that the product continues on, that if they want to do a cross-sell, upsell, because you're usually pegged based on revenue and results. And then on the other hand here, if you actually keep on, if you talk to folks like in professional services, you get to hear what everyone really thinks. So you can actually take that messaging and make sure that the messaging aligns with sales. So it creates a full feedback loop.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. This, that certainly stands out. One of the things I wanted to ask you also, Jeff, was, you categorize mastering advanced technology as a soft skill, which I think some folks might look at as a technical skill, man, or maybe more of a, hard skill. Why do you sort of categorize it as a soft skill, and how can PMMs be better at what I think you call adaptive learners?
So the most important job of a product marketer is you always have to be learning. You can't just kind of sit. You can't just, assume that the market's going to stay the same. You can't assume the technologies are going to, are always going to be around. We have to stay on top of the curve. I mean, as product marketers, we are at that tip of that proverbial spear. We're that North Star. We're that guidepost. And what I'm saying here, and so I had a hard time trying to say if this is a hard skill or soft skill. My mind is that the hard skills are actually the actual, topics you learn. You're learning generative AI or crypto or whatever it is. The soft skill comes into play where you're saying, what do I need to learn and how do I learn it? Because the thing that's really important about soft skills, it's not just simply learning all this stuff. It's that the fact that you have that beginner's mindset, the fact that you always want to be engaged and curious. And that also helps your career too, because if you show that you are really in tune to what's going on here, people will gravitate to you and actually help you, make your career successful because you're helping them be successful. So it's not a very simple, like I can say it in 15 words or less, but it's one of those things where you have to kind of think the bigger picture. And that's kind of what I'm trying to share here in this post.
Awesome.
That makes a lot of sense. And I see how you're positioning it. So like if I give an example, AI skills, right? AI is the hard skill, right? Or like certain AI tools, learning how to use ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these tools, right? Is the hard skill, but the soft skill is actually the process of keeping yourself in tune with what's emerging, right? And sort of aware of these trends and being like having that beginner's mindset where you're able to, carve out time, let's say, to master these and figure out how they apply to your work, right? I'm curious, do you have any examples or ideas around how somebody can do that? Like, is it the first thing that came to my mind is, okay, I'm trying to actually personally stay on top of AI. I think everybody is, right? Like this thing is moving so quickly. The use cases are moving so quickly. And I want to try and figure out both from a product marketing perspective, how can I use it in my go-to-market strategy, but also as a founder, right? And somebody that has a software product, how can we start integrating more and more AI into our own product to help our customers, right? So I'm like carving out, a couple hours on a Friday afternoon, right, to like play around with certain tools. And I'm like following certain people on LinkedIn to like start noting these tools in an Apple Note, right? Like, oh, try this one out, try that one out. Like how do you think about it? Like, is it following certain newsletters? Is it like, carving out time? Like, how do you stay on top of this and make sure that it's a priority when you've got so many other projects going on?
Well, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's important you stay on top of it. Like you said, newsletters are key, right? There's a million newsletters that talk about AI. I mean, we can spend hours naming in the wall. But the most important thing we have to realize as product marketers is that we are actually product marketers. We are product practitioners. We are product spokespeople. We are supposed to be the ones who can actually tell the story. And so so if you like for a small company, it's really important to understand that you only have a limited amount of resources. You have to be that you have to be that spokesperson yourself. And that's why soft skills are important here. So if you are a single practitioner product marketer here, you have to really show that you can build those skills, whether it is taking a few hours a day, playing with, doing prompts and playing around with it and experimenting with it, and then sharing those results, not just with your company, but with the world at large. Because when you have that inbound, outbound, it shows that you have credibility. And that's really ultimately what the goal is here, because you want to grow your career, whether you're working in a small company, whether you're looking at somewhere like a little bit bigger, or even when, let's say, you're even high on the food chain in a mid to large size company. This is all very important.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, again, the way that you've been able to sort of like wrap these different variables together in a consistent and strategic ways is awesome. If I'm a product marketer out there who wants to take action on these things, right, and wants to implement them, and also wants to get buy-in for maybe from other product marketers on the team or leadership, do you have like one sort of concrete piece of, sort of advice or step that they can take to start to develop these skills? Because like the fact of the matter is not everyone is wired to have soft skills out of the box, right? It just is. We're very different humans out there and with different types of personalities, etc. And so like you mentioned that you're inherently extroverted, right? But you might be one of those folks who just for whatever reason is just not wired that way. So anything that you'd give folks out there to start to kind of develop this, maybe one specific action item that they can start to implement today?
Well, the best way to do is just try. I mean, the way I look at it here is no one was perfect. I mean, I started my career off, and when I saw my career trajectory, I saw other people on my team moving up very, very fast. And it was very interesting to see what was going on. I mean, it's very easy to assume, hey, look, the reason why, Bob got that promotion is because Bob is friends with the boss. Bob has some inside angle, which I don't have. The reality is in a lot of cases, that could be the case. That's true. But that's usually not what happens. When you want to move up the ladder or you want to have an advance in your career, the way you have to do it is you have to try, you have to experiment. And bosses like it when people experiment. And not only that, when they win big, it's a bigger win for them. But hey, even if it's kind of not totally successful, as long as you learn from it, that's what the name of the game here is to do.
Awesome. One thing that you talked about in the post, and you covered it slightly just a second ago, but I wanted to unpack it further, is, one of the things that is so crucial in product marketing is you're working with so many different teams, right? So that's where, in my mind, soft skills come in really, really handy, right? Is, you're working with different teams, there's different personalities, there's different priorities, and you have to figure out how to collaborate and coordinate with all these different folks, knowing that certain times you might not be the most important or high priority thing on their agenda, right? But one thing that I found interesting is when we talk about these cross-team sort of collaborations, generally speaking, it's like product marketing to sales, right? Or product marketing to product management, right? You talked about some non-traditional partners that product marketers need to be able to become good friends with, right? And both provide support too, but also get insights from. What are some of those non-traditional roles outside of sales and product that you had in mind when you wrote about that? And like, what sort of relationships should a product marketer try and build with them? Again, with sales, it's pretty straightforward. It's like sales is a channel to bring your messaging to market. So you want to be able to like make sure they're using the right positioning and messaging, right? And using the content in the right way. Product is obviously getting the product out in the market, but also educating the product marketer on like roadmap and features so that the product marketer can build a narrative around it. But what are some of these other roles, and what does that relationship look like between the product marketer and them?
So this is something I learned because I came from the world of IT and professional services way back in the day. I feel that those people really need the attention too. In fact, I remember having many conversations with my peers, and they were very frustrated because the fact that they felt that they had something to share and they couldn't share it. I mean, we're very lucky nowadays that a lot of times, engineers write blogs and we have folks that are doing more. But it's important, in order to really get the visibility you need to advance in your career, it's important to get the big picture. And in the big picture, as I was alluding to earlier, comes from other alternative sources like customer success, because customer success, they're the people who ensure that the KPIs are made, make sure that the product meets everyone's expectations, and then they can expand into a larger group into the company in that customer site, or become an enterprise deal. Conversely, you also have the professional services folks, and the reason why they're important here is because they're the ones who are actually implementing the product. Here, as product marketers, we're often in this ivory tower, right? And we all kind of think, hey, we know what we're talking about, and it's great. But the worst thing we want to do is kind of have that mentality. And when you actually connect with these alternative groups here, it shows that you actually have the EQ, the emotional maturity, to actually understand that to get the whole picture is really to talk to those two stakeholder teams. But there's other ones too. And I'm given my, obviously, I mean, my goal here is to write a very brief article here. I'm happy to kind of get more depth another time. Or if you have questions yourselves, please ask me. I mean, the goal here is to really kind of help you grow. I mean, I can't boil the ocean here, so I'm happy to talk.
Yeah. And for the folks out there who are tuning in, go ahead. I am monitoring the comments and feedback sections here on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you do have any questions, I see there are a couple folks who are tuned in. Go ahead and add them, and we will get to them here. I think that you've touched on something, which is the emotional intelligence piece. There are certainly some people who say that emotional intelligence is not something that can be sort of built or kind of figured out over, through reading a book or through training. And then there's others who dispute that. I don't know where I sit on it, because I think that, like, on one side, emotional intelligence, there's certainly certain people who are more predisposed to leaning into that and are more aware of certain things because of how, again, they're wired. And then there's some other people who, and their communication styles and things like that. And there's some other people who are not. They're just not. They're, the way that they've grown up and evolved into adults, right? Kids are different kind of dynamic here, but this is product marketing for adults. And they just don't lean into it for whatever reason, right? And, I am of the opinion that this is very, very important, right? You can have a really phenomenal organization, and if you're particularly leaders out there, managers, these sort of folks, but not limited to, right? You can have colleagues who are maybe just so out of touch with their emotions, or like don't have the focus on emotional intelligence, that they're like just really making it difficult for other people. And maybe it's not even their intention. So my question is here, do you have any sort of frameworks, books, resources, practices, these sort of things that will help folks understand particularly how to sort of further cultivate their emotional intelligence and how to apply that to the workplace, right? Because that's key, right?
No, you're 100% right. I mean, I think the biggest problem I've learned, though, just from a meta topic here, I mean, the word soft skills kind of implies that it's squishy. It's like it's not useful. Product marketers by trade are kind of taught, you got to focus on the hard skills. The hard skills are the only thing that matter. And the reality is it's not, right? We need to have these additional background skills to do what you need to do. In a future blog, I'd love to, or a future conversation, I could be happy to kind of share with you more about those books that I found useful along the way. Right now, it's like I don't have any offhand here, but if if it's something that you want me to share, I'm happy to write another Substack and kind of give my my 5 top books that'll teach on EQ as well. That's great.
I can jump in and share one that personally has. I know a lot of people have referenced this book. And I personally found it to be quite useful. Is actually there's a couple that I can mention myself. So one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Is that, I always get the title wrong, but I think that's a Dale Carnegie, right? I mean, it's not like groundbreaking stuff, but it's kind of like very easy to digest and understand. And and in the end, it comes down to like everybody's human. Everybody has their own thoughts and opinions and priorities. And how do you sort of like build relationships with people where there's this mutual beneficial sort of payoff, right? So I think that's been a book that I've referred to frequently. Different principles, different lessons that I've learned there. The other one might not be as much sort of seen as like a soft skill book, because I think it's written by a like professional negotiator, like a FBI sort of negotiator, but it's Getting to Yes. And it's a book that's very much so sort of referenced in the sales context, but I've actually found to be really, really valuable, not just for selling external customers, but also internal stakeholders, right? On like, let's say I'm a product marketer and I'm trying to launch a product, and I need it to be on a certain date because we have other launches going around it. And my product management stakeholder wants it to be either earlier or later based on, engineering's priorities, or based on like how much of a priority they think that certain feature is. And I think that's a very common case, right? Where like maybe the product manager thinks that this feature is much bigger than, the bigger story that the product marketer is trying to tell. They think it's maybe a little bit lower. So there's a lot of negotiation that goes on here around like, that timing. But that book provided a ton of principles, right? And one of the big takeaways that I had from that book is a lot of negotiation tactics that you hear about, there's always a loser in a certain end of it, right? Like the salesperson wins and the customer loses, or the customer wins with a big discount and the salesperson loses. Or in this case, the product manager gets that launch date that they cared about and the product marketer has to scramble and loses, or the product marketer gets it and then the, product manager feels like overlooked or mistreated, and that relationship is hindered, right? And there's a lot of strategies in that book around having a conversation, having a communication, and asking questions that surfaces the reason behind each stakeholder's feeling of why this is a priority or not, and trying to come to a common consensus or solution that enables both to get what they want out of it, right? And it might not always be what you think. Like I think a big learning in that book as well is like the pushback that you're getting from product managers might not actually be the real pushback that's under the surface of why they really care about it, right? And if you can ask those questions and bubble to the surface what the true challenges are, you can actually come up with a solution that does work for them and work for you, right? I wanted to tell a story that they tell in the book about this orange and two kids that like wanted the oranges, but I don't want to butcher it. I don't know it well enough. I need to refer back to it, but it's like in the end, the mother, right, who's trying to help these two kids settle the challenge, manages to come to a conclusion that works for both of them.
Justin, you know me well. I love this topic, and we can talk about this. Like this is actually what one of the things that fires me up the most. What's interesting is my father is an industrial organizational psychologist. And so I've grown up with also former monk. And so I've grown up with a lot of esoteric stuff, but even very particular to the business world, this idea of industrial organizational. And it was funny. I was talking to someone yesterday, Jeff, who was discussing how like certain leadership teams are just not really thinking about this realm of soft skills or emotional intelligence or spirituality or whatever, right? Whatever you want to call it, because I know that it's hard to kind of take a word like spirituality and put it in a professional context. And, people are like, "What is that?" You know what I mean? Like, although is bullshit, because we're not separated. I don't take this body, off when I leave my business meetings, right? It's the same being. But anyways, and what was interesting was that the bottom line, in my opinion, and I don't know how anyone could argue this, but if you feel differently, please comment on the comment wall and let us know what you think. But we need to put more emphasis on this stuff, because if you're not doing, to Justin's point, if you're not in tune with using emotional intelligence is important, I think, for it makes a lot of sense not to make other people's lives miserable and burn or torch the organization down, especially if you're in the leadership position, but also particularly CEOs, right? That's the most challenging role and the most lonely role of any organization. But having the emotional intelligence to look inside yourself. And to Justin's point, you may have some stuff going on that is related to work or not, that then is like you're letting that stuff out in a professional setting, right? So being able to cultivate that emotional intelligence to be able to understand what is going on inside of you is very, very important, right? And so that's another angle, again, that we haven't talked about, that I think leadership teams that are successful long term get, right? Like my father, I mentioned, is an industrial organizational psychologist. He works for some of the biggest companies in the world, and his now in his retirement, he's with American Express. Now, American Express, he's a W-2 now, which American Express focuses heavily on employee wellness and happiness, right? In fact, I'm looking at my dad's picture here. He's got something. The program that he runs in his team is called Healthy Minds, right? Like, you're talking about American Express, credit card products, financial products, blah, blah, blah. But they have an entire program across the entire organization that's called Healthy Minds. And so they understand, and he can't give me details out of confidentiality, but they understand at a high level, to build a company that's successful and that is sustainable requires that. So I'll get off my soapbox here, but I think, like, we, even as startup founders, we need to understand the number one reason why, for the founders, we got a lot of small companies and founders that tune into the show and follow us. The number one reason that startups fail, number one, and don't take my word for it, even though I've experienced it firsthand, is founder disputes, basically divorces, right? And so, and if you think about it, how many times, Jeff, have you ever heard someone say, God, I love my manager, but I'm quitting, right? No, it very rarely. I don't think I've ever heard it. Somehow the relationship gets sideways, and it ends that way, right? So again, emotional intelligence, these soft skills, really, really appreciate the topic.
Yeah, while you were talking about that, one thing that came to mind, there were two books I just thought of. One is called Crucial Conversations. Mm-hmm. That's a really big one. I first heard about that book in like the mid 2010s. It really kind of taught me how to like have these difficult conversations with the stakeholders you're talking about. Sales, your partner, you said, everyone. I'm sure your father probably read that book too, because it's important that you understand how to phrase it in a certain way. You want to be able to understand. You don't want to, like, the most important things, you have to learn to get along with your colleagues to get ahead. The ones that don't survive are the ones who say, hey, I'm a lone wolf and I can do it all by myself. And as an engineer, we're awfully constantly trained to think that we have this, this self-directed selfishness here. And if you're a small company, a big company, where you want to be successful as a marketer, the one who ultimately is successful as a marketer is the one who engages and understands those crucial conversations. One other hint I'll tell you too, I was thinking, is that you want to read the books of the field that you're working with. I will kind of go back real quick to product management. Read the books by the product managers. Look at them out there. See what their goals are. It's important that you see how they see it, because if you help them, they help you. And that's really the key takeaway that we have to think about here. And because as product marketers, our challenge always is to wonder, it's like, are we going to survive? Are we okay? It's always an existential challenge for product marketers. I mean, last year it was, a question of like understanding about revenue. This year, it could be something completely different. The goal is that we have to just think of these philosophies and these conversations and these skills that will ensure you grow further. And so couldn't agree more with both of you.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we're up on time here, even though I would love to spend the rest of the day talking about this topic, because I think it's Justin's smiling right now because he knows that this is the thing that I think is the most important attribute of a successful team, and we talk about it all the time, right? And having that set of soft skills is going to help you win as an organization, win as a team within that organization, but also as a professional and as a human being, right? Because at the end of the day, we need to enjoy our day-to-day, or else it becomes unsustainable, right? And then we're just like a dog running in circles, chasing its tail, going from one company to the other, and you're going, or one project or venture, and you're going, what's the common denominator here? Me. And so, how do we kind of optimize that? But for the folks out there, thank you so much for joining Jeff here and Justin and myself for this awesome, important topic. As you can hear, I'm a little under the weather, so I apologize. As you all know there, we do these things. Well, hopefully you all know that we do these events every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. I think that's 11, right, Justin?
Yeah. You want me to jump in here so that you can clear your throat? So yeah, we do these every Wednesday, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We've sort of traditionally done more topics around Asset Mule and our product and showing our product and showing new features and showing it for different use cases. We want to now start bringing in experts like Jeff to talk about different topics. So this is the first time we've done one of these, but there's going to be more to come. So, if you're interested in a particular topic, whether it be a round 2 of soft skills and going deeper into certain areas or something else, reach out to George, reach out to myself, comments on this video. If you have any questions for Jeff, you can find him on LinkedIn. He's very active on there. I highly recommend following him because you'll learn a ton about not just soft skills and product marketing, but also the traditional hard skills too, which I know Jeff has a lot of experience and talks about. And if you want to, learn about Asset Mule and what we're doing in the sales enablement space, follow Asset Mule, follow George, follow myself. We share, obviously stuff about our product and about our space, but also about our learning in this journey, about product marketers, about sales folks, and what we're learning out there in the field. So without further ado, we're going to end here today, but don't stop the conversation here. Feel free to find us, and we'd be happy to continue it offline.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much again, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, George.